I'd like to commence the IGDS book launch of Our Caribbean, a gathering of lesbian and gay writing from the Antilles, by introducing our first featured speaker, Colin Robinson, one of the contributors to the anthology. Colin turns 50 next year. He is a community organizer and creative writer who is currently enrolled in the MFA fiction writing program here at UWI St. Augustine. He was a contributor to the recent sexualities issue of the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies, and two of his poems appear in Peepal Tree Press's forthcoming Caribbean Erotic Anthology. He edited Think Again, a 2003 volume of narratives challenging the accountability of HIV prevention to gay men's real lives, was a field producer for Marlon Riggs' provocative 1989 documentary film Tongues Untied. Sorry, Colin. Well, hey, Tongues United and then Tongues Untied. And he played a key role in the development of the 24-year-old Other Countries, Black Gay Voices. He spent 3 decades working on sexual health and sexual citizenship in the US and the Caribbean. And he's currently communications coordinator for CAISO, Trinidad and Tobago's coalition advocating for inclusion of sexual orientation, whose blog gspottt.wordpress.com he edits. Colin?
Thank you, Pia, and thank you, Thomas, for bringing Our Caribbean to the Caribbean. The critical reception of the book has really privileged a lot of the nonfiction, the nonfiction work, nonfiction prose in it. So I want to read my piece in the book, which is a poem. But I wanted to also read another piece and dedicate it to the book. It was a piece that came out of a similar project that I was part of. I spent 19 years in Trinidad, 26 years in the US, and I've been back home for 3. And the project was Other Countries, and its founder described it this way: I begin to grasp the largeness of the work before us, the fact that we are not only creating essays or poems or stories, but the fact that we are creating culture. We are expressing ourselves as a people and shaping the consciousness of ourselves as a people. We are creating ourselves. This piece, called Unfinished Work, was written out of that process and then was rededicated to a political project that happened in Curacao in 1997 when the Caribbean Forum for Lesbians, All Sexuals, and Gays was founded, that actually gave its name later on to JFLAG. And I want to dedicate it tonight to the Our Caribbean project. I shall go without companions and with nothing in my hand. I shall go through many places that I cannot understand until I come to my own country, which is a pleasant... Maricón. Cuando gritan maricón, yo oigo cimarrón. I remember Michael. We were buddies, sisters that summer of my first return. I remember Michael long before I could conceive him as a friend. I remember Michael dropping curtsy to Bulla, crossing St. Mary's Schoolyard. St. Fairies was the other name. I remember Michael's thank you, neutering insult. I remember Michael. We've both survived. We're still alive, apart, so I remember Michael through this story, though truth may vary somewhat. It's this version that becomes the myth for me. Llamaron maricones, oímos cimarrones, y viniendo a this quilombo, we arrived from different places, other countries, cities, villages, plantations, Bantustans and ghettos, other colonies and nations, old and new, from strange lands, but not strangers. We carried tongues like oil and flames of Pentecost that linked and licked the darkness of past wounds and heals and opened holes of memory in passion, whispered, bola, bati, baby, faggot, maricon, adodi, magic words, and some were kings and queens of color come from other galaxies whose suns had failed, some wearing black hearts on their cheeks and foreheads, history twisted in their hair, emblazoned on their eyes, painted on their lips like scars of heritage, brave outriders, trumpets beckoning like Joshua's, Jimmy, Godfrey, Adrian, Andre, Essex, Ian, Joseph, Mario, Eve, Kelvin, from Babylon, from Babel, coming in procession under canopies of breath, a chain of tongues unchained, refashion rotten syllables and poisoned metaphor and broken roots and metonyms of pain and flickering, light the journey further home. I remember home, remembering Michael. I see Miss Ting. This is all a whole the other day, the Tiffin who, in a fete in Brooklyn. Michael, I did not remember him. The queen who ruled our school days, then remembering, I refused. I am afraid of forgetting, Michael, forgetting our language, afraid of these new words, not ours. Gritaron maricone, no oímos cimarrone, and we came, arrivants, awkward migrants, changing territory, heard ourselves, eager, muffled voices learned to sing in their full range, falsettos, deepen, basses, soar, some uttering first words like gunda, grunts and groans, gasps and moans, laughs and sighs, shouts and cries, voices echoing, questioning the silence which they slay. Griots shaping language into power, food, and substitute for sex, into tools like weapons of survival, rage, and passion, with the clarity of spit. Language of retention and of hope. Michael, I have grown away from you from roots, from childhood's sturdy trunk, from branching adolescent boughs, from anchors in the soil of Trinidad, like seeds arrived in boats, Michael. I have flown away from you, back turned to the Gulf of Paria, seat-belted in the coffle of the jumbo jet, across a modern middle passage, overflying backyard islands never walked, to glittering North Atlantic ones. Michael, I have been away too long, left ripe with promise for a land of promise, with promises to soon come back with more. Intention is not meaning. Cuando gritan maricón. A past and future abandoned prematurely in the jet stream over Piarco, I feel in ripeness rotting. Cuando gritan. When they call me maricón, like anti-man, like faggot, batiman, masisi, bola, remembering Michael, my ears resound instead with cimarrón, echo marron, reverberate maroon like steel pan drum beats, maroon like curdled blood, maroon like black and lavender when they fuse, maroon like memory. Cuando griten maricón, pervert the language. Oigamos cimarrón, the simplest acts of the bravest, like rearranging syllables is revolution. Rewrite history. Redecline the past and conjugate a future, reinvent etymology, grow new roots. Until when I have found a home in that quilombo, I must return, I must remake my history, remember Michael. Que griten, they will call me maricón, shout bola, I will curtsy. I remember Michael with the passion that remembering brings. Come like cimarron, cracking my tongue, lashing it free like a whip. Thank you. This is the 1998 piece that's in the book. It's called The Mechanic. Long strokes, he urges, between breaths, gently guides my touch along his rigid spine, all the way down. Down, my fingers think, clambering over the dense tufts where his legs separate with a splash. His muscles rise naked in the tub, push against my yearning sponge. We both blink ourselves back from this daily brink. His grease has crawled up under my raveled fingernails. He comes here each day after hours of work fingering engines to life in the shed next door, sits in the tub, tells stories of his wife and 3 children back in Carriacou, the 2 sons here, the goats. He would smile whenever he caught me staring at him from the house. You just like to watch me work. He asked last May, or first words in a year. In silence, polishes the fender he had straightened that morning, the oversized blue overalls sliding back and forth over each contour of his unclothed body. Long strokes, he winks at me, sharing the secret to the gleaming shine. Suddenly, he turns toward me, my eyes still locked on the troubling movement in his trousers, dart quickly upwards. Sheepishly, he clasps his hand over his loose, hardening dick, eye-to-eye grins. You see, I need to pee real bad. I open the door, silently shepherd him into the narrow hallway. My flank brushes his blue surface. He opens the door wide, stands over the bowl, raising his voice over his noisy stream. It don't even have a standpipe in his shed. He offers a wet hand in thanks, stumbles for language, fumbling in an inner pocket for an immigration form and an old Bic. It's so much books you have. You just like to read. Hesitates, releases the thought. You could help me write something? He makes some halting letters on the page, staring into my eyes for guidance, pauses. My left hand, like a child's, grasps the leathery back of his to form in cursive I, P, L, E, D, G, E. Long strokes. I smile up at him. Tonight, come back and clean up. We can finish then. My betrothal. The rest is ritual. Every day he comes, just once, without knocking. I notice the sound of his frothing piss, the faucet running, the moan of his torso against the hot water, the scrub brush struggling through the coarse hair on his chest. Hearing me stir, he talks loudly through the always ajar doorway, some story about home or people from home here. I enter without knocking. To listen, sit on the unflushed bowl, lazily pick up the sponge. Your back's still black. He shudders, long strokes, lies in the blackened water, eyes closed, will not move, waiting until I reach down below his waist. He rises with a splash without words, dries, dresses, wraps his arms around me, calls me son, while his overgrown fingers stuff $1 all the way into my front pocket, slip a quarter in my back, scraping his stubbled chin against my forehead. Pulling them out with sweaty palms, I protest. Use it for soap, he insists, squeezing all the air out of me. Thanks.
They stopped running and sat down on the loose earth in the furrows between the rows of young cane. The wind sang through the serrated sugarcane grass, They each knew why they had come here. They did not talk. Without any suggestion from the other, each boy began to take off his clothes. They were barefooted and forgot about what Christopher's father had said about catching jiggers. Then they wrestled a little, laughing and tugging at each other's pants until they both fell on the ground. They pulled off their merino jerseys and squirmed in the soft, grainy earth which stuck to their skin. Their small penises grew hard. From further down the gully, a train clanged along the line. It was as if they were blind and feeling without seeing, touching each other's toties, rubbing them in their hands and cupping the tight, small balls. Nothing happened, just this tingling feeling to go on and on, but nothing happened. It felt as if something might happen, but it didn't. Finishing their games like their others, they began putting on their clothes again and tied their jerseys around their necks. Out of the gully, they entered an orchard of fruit trees. They climbed, picked, and sucked grapefruit, the juice dribbling down their chests. This is what happens is the boys are going off to a boarding school, and Christopher's father sort of arms him with a cricket bat to make a man of him, with linseed oil and with little help as what to do with it, really, the bat and the linseed oil, and how to play the game. And I take up from there, take up the story in its conclusion as Christopher is left at school. Christopher watched his father's car from the portico of the school, round the bend, move along the avenue of casuarinas. He followed it with his eye until it became a dot. He imagined his mother and father driving over the plains alone. He continued to look out long after their car had disappeared. The horizon was different from here. The first night he could not fall asleep. David was somewhere else in the dormitory. He was 1 year ahead. He didn't know the boy next to him. There was a dim nightlight outside Father Benedict's room, which would stay on all night. Next to his bed, the cricket bat leaned up against the locker. He touched it and smelt the linseed on his fingers. As the first term continued, Christopher and David saw less and less of each other. At first they had held together, a new boy with his more experienced friend. Then, without understanding what it was, some force was pulling them apart. David was chosen by other boys. He moved around in a gang. They weren't the boys Christopher liked. It was not safe to be on your own or to be with a single friend. There were loyalties and rivalries. Boys who did not take part were sissies. Sissy, sissy, a boy called. Christopher's eyes burnt, but he would not show that he wanted to cry. His hurt was deep, his anger furious. He did not know what it meant, this change, but it felt like they wanted him to disown something quite close and precious to him, or to give them something. He sensed what it might be. Why did other boys belong to one gang and others to another? Why couldn't he belong to David's gang? Why couldn't he be alone with David? And their games and the holidays were a secret. They had always been a secret, a kind of secret. But here they were definitely not to be spoken about. In a way, what they did was a secret from themselves. They avoided each other when other boys were around. One afternoon, Christopher struggled behind the other boys, back from the refectory after tea. He stood near a bonfire outside the woodwork shop. He was absorbed, kicking bits of wood into the fire and watching the shavings curl into the flames. Then he heard crunching footsteps on the gravel path. He turned to look. It was an older boy. Christopher continued to throw bits of wood onto the fire. He watched the rain bubbling off the bark of the heat. Then he felt the older boy right next to him. The boy spoke softly. "I want to kiss you, like if you were a girl." Then he walked away. Christopher turned to say something. What should he say? Wait. The boy was well ahead of him. He began running up the steep, stony path to the college. "Wait!" Christopher shouted again, trying to catch up, confused, but wanting to say something. "Wait!" Christopher slipped on the gravel. The boy had lost him. Christopher felt dejected. Something had stirred in him. He thought of how he had lost David. He turned back from where he had fallen and took the lower path into the forest behind the college. This was out of bounds, but he decided to risk it. He felt like he used to feel when he was smaller and had climbed to the top of the tamarind tree. Dangerous. Quite quickly he was climbing into the hills, looking down on the college. He could see the other boys like little dots running around. He kept from where other boys might be climbing themselves, finding secret places to smoke. He skirted the old scout's den with the list of measurements scratched forcibly into the wooden walls. Timothy de Freitas has the biggest cock. Christopher found himself running now, slipping and grabbing hold of the young saplings. His heart was pounding in his chest. He had a stitch in his side. He was beginning to cry. His lips were trembling. He reached a clearing where it was different from the shadows of the forest. The light was streaming down from the afternoon sky. High in a blue sky, he saw a flock of green parrots. Then suddenly the air was full of their screams. He was thirsty. He decided to head down to the valley where the river flowed over large rocks. Suddenly he saw it. His heart was in his mouth. A pink and black coral snake was entwined on a branch which lay across the track. He knelt down quietly and picked up a stone and a stick, and he hit the branch with the stick, and the snake slithered to the ground. But before it could slide away into the grass, Christopher threw his stone, and then another and another, a large one falling on the snake. It was crushed. Long after he knew that he must have killed it, Christopher continued to heap stones upon the snake, crushing its head. He was deliberate. He wanted it dead. When he finished, he felt exhausted. He sat down and dried his eyes. Then he realized that all the while he had been crying. Christopher found the river and drank from his cupped hands lying on his belly across a rock. In the days which followed, Christopher still wanted to talk to the boy who had said that he wished to kiss him like he was a girl. He didn't get a chance. He wrote him a letter, keeping it in his pocket. It burnt his leg with its presence. Then he tore it into small pieces and threw it on the bonfire one afternoon, where he stood on the gravel path, straggling behind the other boys, waiting. Thank you.